I guess I'd like to start by saying you're welcome because my 2 teenage daughters are single-handedly supporting your industry. So you never want to start a panel this way by saying, in my first book. But I am going to start this panel by saying, in my first book, which was called The CIO Paradox, I talked about the conflicts or contradictions that are inherent to the CIO role. One of those conflicts I call the archivist-futurist paradox, because as CIO, you're responsible for technology decisions made about your environment decades before you even joined the company, but you're also responsible for a technology strategy that will bring your company into the future. You are responsible for the future while bringing along with you the sins of the past. So I used in that book the concept of healthcare, or the industry of healthcare, because in healthcare, the archivist piece is tragic. You've got legacy systems, of fragmented ecosystem, companies where the employees don't even work for the same companies. You've got providers, payers. So the archivist piece is tough. But the future is life and wellness and health. In retail today, I think you could apply the archivist-futurist paradox easily as well. I talked to a retail CIO the other day who said, my systems are so old they can drink and drive, which I tweeted because I thought that was hilarious. But of course, the future is the entire industry. The future is meeting the customer where she is, with many entrants into the industry who do not have that legacy. But I've shifted my thinking. The archivist-futurist paradox no longer belongs to the CIO. It is the business's challenge. Legacy technology is a corporate liability, and there is no IT strategy. There's a business strategy that exists in a digital world. The challenge is that the notion of an integrated strategy that has technology in it is much easier in theory than in practice. In practice, you still have, in some companies, oh, by the way, I will talk to you at some point. I'm not just going to talk. Listen, if history is a guide at some point, are you going to turn that timer on for me at some point? Sorry. Or else we'll just go all day, and I'm sure you have other things to do. Thank you very much. The us and them divide still persists, right? Why is IT doing this to us? We're just going to go buy our own technology. So I'm an executive recruiter, and we place CIOs in their jobs. And when I go to a CEO and I say, what are we trying to solve for? They say, we need a CIO who's a change agent, who's going to drive change. But then when I say to a CIO, what's your biggest challenge? They say the business won't change. However, everybody's got to get together because technology is the future of retail. To my mind, the entire industry is at stake. So what my goal for this session is, with our 4 esteemed panelists, we're going to learn about how they're managing digital transformation in their companies for sure, but I'm also hoping that you, who are all business partners to IT, walk away a little more informed about how you can work collaboratively with IT to realize all the potential that IT can bring to your businesses. Sound good? Sound like what you signed up for? Okay, good. I'm going to start with you, Michael, on the end. At Six Flags, what does digital transformation mean? How do you define that? And can you give a great example?
I can try. So, good afternoon, everyone. So Six Flags, I'm sure a lot of you know about Six Flags theme parks, but 20 sites around the country. We're responsible for retail, food, as well as admissions. So when we talk about a Six Flags experience, IT is managing all aspects of a very large shopping mall. And in a lot of your situations where you have stores, it's a location with maybe 10 point-of-sale terminals or 20 point-of-sale terminals. A Six Flags park will have in excess of 300 point-of-sale terminals. It's that enormity of a situation. So digital to us could mean a variety of things. So at the very least, we talk about, you hear the term Internet of Things, and when we talk about what that means in our environment, it could be something as simple as communicating to all of our guests. When you enter the park, and we now know that you're there, as you access certain areas of the park, knowing that you just entered that area, I want to send a specific message to you as that consumer who happens to have a child between the age of 7 and 12 years old. And that message may be, hey, don't forget to come to the safari park between 2 and 4 for a special feeding with a giraffe. Or really what you want to hear is, hey, you're leaving, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, have you stopped by the gift shop to pick up a t-shirt? Digital could mean specific messages based on the attendance that day on our digital signage around the park, digital TVs around the park, messages that we can control across the board. Because our parks are larger in nature, we have the ability to test different types of technologies to different sectors of the marketplace as well. So just a couple of quick examples.
Thank you. Jared, AC Moore?
Hi, everyone. So Jared Phipps, I'm from AC Moore. AC Moore, for those of you who don't know us, is an arts and crafts retailer. We're all the way from Maine to Florida. We have 136 stores, and we sell general merchandise around arts and crafts, seasonal decor, and a whole number of other things. So for us, it could mean a number of different things. What does digital mean? But I think the way I try to think about it the most, and what I try to bring to our executive committee, is digital is really just a way of working. With digital, it's not necessarily for me a technology or a specific element of what we're delivering as an outcome with that technology. It's the spirit of agile development. It's a spirit of being able to provide incrementality into our business. And so we actually, we have our consumer app, and we have our consumer website. We have a number of things we've done internally, but I think what's been really interesting for us is leveraging digital technologies to transform the business. I was a consultant for 11 years with Deloitte. I did a number of very large programs, change programs with them, and it always seemed like change management was this thing you got ready for during the project. It was based on a requirement that was captured in January, going to get delivered in November, and it was an event. What we've seen with digital technologies, especially applying them internally in the business, and externally as well, is this notion of not necessarily what exactly are we going to be when we grow up, but what are the steps? What's the next step we're going to take? And going into sort of a digital methodology of developing solutions, we're actually seeing that sort of agile approach apply to process change. And so for us, that's what I try to espouse to my executive team, because frankly they don't care that we're developing it in the mean stack wrapped in a Cordova mobile application. They don't even know what that means. They just know that they can ask me for something, and I don't have to say, look, you're gonna have to wait 11 months for that. We'll make it, if it's the most important thing to do now, we'll do it next.
Thank you. How about at Vitamin Shop?
Sorry, question still as example of digital innovation?
What does digital innovation mean at Vitamin Shop, and an example of that?
Got it. Good afternoon. For those of you that aren't aware, Vitamin Shop, health and wellness retailer, both online and in stores, about 800 stores across the country. What digital innovation means to us is really, what we're really calling it is becoming a customer experience-based retailer. And that is because the digital tools available to businesses and consumers over the last 10 years, and especially with the launch of the smartphone, has just completely changed the game with how brands need to interact. So we've actually, like I think a couple other people have mentioned, digital is just a means to an end. It's a tool. It's not a business strategy. There are still strategies around marketing. Who is your customer? What's the experience? What's the brand experience that you're trying to create? What has been so disruptive has been that because the means available have changed so much, that's what businesses are really struggling with. So we don't talk about digital anymore as something special. We talk about it that everyone, the whole senior leadership team, needs to think and be asking themselves, how are digital capabilities going to impact my goals and what I'm trying to do to deliver to the business? And so we think about it very broadly there, but it still comes down to what is the customer experience we're creating.
Thank you.
So PVH, for those of you who don't know PVH, is the second largest apparel company in the world. Our two flagship brands are Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, but we have a lot of other ones. We spent a lot of time thinking about actually this question. For us, it's as much culture as anything. And I'm going to build a little bit on what the rest of the panel here has said. For us, it's really about seeing the world as a digital native would. When you take on any kind of business problem, business challenge, of planning, it's not being constrained by the culture of the past. It's not being constrained by we always did it this way. But it's really seeing what's possible and being able to move the needle on things. And that may show up in the supply chain and digitizing assets early in the process so that you can share across the different channels and have different renderings available. Or it may show up on consumer experiences on our e-com sites or in our stores. But it's truly, first and foremost, a culture change and a mindset change. It's being agile. It's all the things the other folks here have said, but it's really being able to apply that in a way that hasn't been done before, because that's what's disrupting us. When we look at the Amazons of the world or what Uber did, those are the things that they're disrupting. They've unconstrained their thinking. And a lot of our acquisitions that we looked at recently, there's been a couple. When we bought True & Co. was in the press recently, which is a kind of startup lingerie brand. They've all done things very innovative. They approach the market very differently, and we're as much buying them for their mindsets as we are for buying them for the product and extension.
So that was a great segue, Scott, not rehearsed, I should tell you. Much of this is spontaneous. You talked about mindset. If you could do a Vulcan mind meld on your key business partners, so let's say chief marketing officer, head of merchandising, head of retail operations, so that tomorrow morning they all woke up understanding something about technology, about digital, about the way they need to work or change, so that the company could reap the full benefit of those expensive IT investments, what would you select? What do you want them to wake up tomorrow morning saying, I understand, I see the light, I accept this as an eternal internal truth?
I think first and foremost would be to involve us early in the planning process, to really be a partner at the table in business strategy, and not just a, hey, we want to go here, you're going to have to give me this particular widget. All too often we'll find that some vendor out there has a relationship with somebody on the board or somebody that's a president of a division, and lo and behold, now I'm meeting and my whole team is running off in another direction on some thing that might be a really great idea, it might be a really great business strategy, but just because this relationship was there, you're pulling away and you're taking those resources and redirecting them. So the earlier on we can get into planning to talk about what is your business strategy and how do we need to enable it and how can we help think out of the box is really the better.
Excellent. And same question to you, John.
Yeah, I think, gosh, that's a great question. I think getting involved early is one. I also think, though, if I could do a Vulcan mind meld, is to be open to learning and being open to new ways on how you're going to reach your customer. I think, if anything, what we've been challenged at the Vitamin Shop is just people thinking out of their traditional roles or their traditional ways of doing things. And so a real openness to bringing in outside parties, to doing ideation, those kind of things, to form that vision of the customer experience is probably what I would wish for the most. And I guess to be fair, I want to throw in the mind meld that I think the IT people need to do, though, is that this process is the world of digital is very different than traditional IT systems, which were much more linear in terms of what you were trying to get done. And the world of digital has created a very non-linear, much more creative experience. And so I think there's a burden on the IT person to get more comfortable in that space versus maybe how we're used to operating.
So just for the sake of this panel, IT is perfect on this panel. IT doesn't need to change at all. It's all about our business partners. But I appreciate the remark. Jared.
Yeah, I think that in the spirit of agile process innovation, agile development, you can erase a mistake in 2 to 4 weeks. So we've made plenty of mistakes. I've only been in my role for under a year. But the beauty is once we make a mistake, we can erase it within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks as we iterate. And so the mind meld I would have to my business partners, and it was interesting because I joined a company where all the executives were brand new, so they sort of had to trust me up front. Nobody, you know, as while we were storming and forming and norming. So they had to trust me and on a couple of things. And one of the things I said was you have to empower people that are really junior in your organization to sit in on meetings and make decisions. And I said, you know, look, it's going to feel a lot different than that executive workshop that you did when you implemented Oracle, where you all sat in a room for 7 hours and, you know, bashed your, you know, all these ideas around. You designed it, and then 11 months later, you got it. It's not about that. You need to empower people junior in your organization to make decisions on behalf of your entire function, and just know that the safety net is this: if they screw up, or if something goes awry, we're going to be there to catch you, because we don't have to go into another 6 or 12 or 18-month development cycle. We can actually course correct thereafter. So I think that's the message is really driving down decision rights deep into your organization to the people who actually know how things need to get done, providing that steering committee oversight to make sure that the train stays on the tracks, and just go.
Thank you.
What they said. So the key to a lot of this is communication, mutual communication back and forth. And when you talk about an agile development process, it's like just-in-time inventory. You want to make sure that you are delivering what your stakeholders actually need. I had a meeting this morning with one of our stakeholder teams, and we're pushing back saying, don't let IT make the decisions for you. Don't let us make operational decisions that are going to affect how you run your business. If you don't have a seat at that table through the project planning process and through that engagement model and that delivery model, then what happens is 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks later, you get a product. That's not what I wanted. I wanted this. Well, okay, well, we were off and running and no one answered our emails, and we need to get this thing going. You need to stay engaged through the process. I am not working in the warehouse. I don't know how you receive equipment and want to receive materials and want to get them into your stores. If the process that IT is putting in play doesn't work for you, stay engaged throughout to avoid those types of mishaps.
And what do you feel is a good, effective engagement model? Staying engaged is one thing. You know, we can have lunch once in a while, but how does that work as a framework?
We put framework in place where we'll have program managers involved, project managers involved that will deal with the IT function, but then we expect side by side a stakeholder team. So if I'm dealing with our retail team, who is the lead person from retail that is going to sit side by side with the developers to make sure that we're on track and we're delivering based on what you actually need, what we as IT geeks think you want. I'm not walking through your retail shops. I challenge my developers to get out in the field and to make sure they are doing that, but they don't do it every day. They're not there engaged with customers every day. So we look for a product champion from our corresponding, whether it's retail or food or whomever, to make sure that the project is on track and that they are running interference with their own folks to make sure that we're delivering on what your expectations are.
Great, thank you. So a couple of years ago, I bought a treadmill that I put into my bedroom. And months later, I was hanging all my clothes on it, and I hadn't gotten in any better shape. And what I learned was it's not about the technology, it's about the adoption of the technology. But it's always struck me as bizarre that CIOs from way over in IT are responsible for driving adoption in areas of the business where they can't possibly have as much influence as the managers of those businesses. So we've so far been talking about engagement models for delivery. How about for adoption? Scott, who's responsible for making sure marketing is using the technologies that they requested?
Yeah, it's paramount to everything. At the end of the day, I have a little saying, which is, technology is easy, people are hard, right? And if you don't account for that up front when you're doing anything and start planning for that engagement, adoption, all the way at the front of a program, whether it's a short agile sprint or whether it's a longer ERP implementation that you're going on, you will fail. And by the way, you need ways to measure it. So in order to, like all of us in this room are in some way, shape, and form retailers, retail is detail, just like anything else. You need to have those KPIs that you're going to come back to and hold people accountable. And part of the way you do what some of the folks have been talking about here, about empowering people further down the organization, is to have good KPIs on what you're empowering them to do and then hold them accountable to those KPIs. Again, it's got to start way early in the process, and it's got to be something that's agreed upon. It can't just be IT coming saying, here's your KPIs, but together through engaging up front, you need to plan out what those KPIs are going to be and how you're going to measure them, what frequency, and how you're going to hold people accountable, whether it's adoption or change or process, automation, whatever it is that you're looking to gain.
John, at Vitamin Shop, do you hold business functional leaders accountable for, do they have adoption metrics, adoption goals? How does that work?
To varying degrees. I think a lot of the new platforms and the new things we're doing, we are still figuring that out. But it does start, I think, even before the metrics, and I completely agree that is part of it, it really is a mindset. And I have always been very open as an IT leader that's where I say it's not IT's tech, it's the business's tech. There are no, I'm known for saying all around the business, there are no IT projects, there are business projects supported by technology. And I think the business both appreciates that and then gets a little scared, but then they're willing to engage with you in a conversation, because I think the other part of IT leaders' jobs is to be a partner to the business to help them become a better consumer of technology. How to be what's the old, Jerry Maguire, help me help you kind of thing line. That is where I think that's the difference between being just a technology person versus being a business leader who happens to run technology.
Thank you. How about you? How do you make sure that your tools get adopted?
And I'll just reflect in the digital sphere. So all of these things that we're moving in a more digital cadence I'll be honest, we don't measure it because we're building what they've told us to build next. So what I've seen, so we have 5 products that we're running in parallel right now. Most of them they're all cross-functional in nature, but really focused on merchandising, whether it's pricing or purchasing or a number of other key facets. And they're telling us what they want, and they're telling us loud and clear, and then we're going off and delivering it. So I have people who literally, when they walk by my office, they say, when are we getting the new purchase order form that's going to integrate directly into RMS so that we don't have to rekey these orders in? They're actually, the demand is so pent up. Now that could be indicative of the company and maybe some pent up demand just in general for technology and support for business process. But because we're always working on the next best thing that they've told us is the next best thing, adoption doesn't really play into it. And I think that coupled with you have to maintain an eye for the customer, making sure that you're building a piece of technology that's not just usable but functional. If you're doing the two in tandem, listening to them for the next improvement you're going to make and building something that has that customer experience built in, we don't, right now, at least in the digital sphere, we're not actually measuring adoption anywhere in the business.
Any questions? If you have a question or comment, raise your hand and I'll ignore you and proceed with my originally scripted content. I'm just kidding. You have a question. Did I see one? Anybody? Okay, go ahead.
So the question is, how do you partner with the business in prioritizing that, right? Driving change. I've been in organizations where there's just an insatiable appetite, right? You kind of mentioned that there's a lot of pent-up demand. How do you negotiate that with the business effectively, and how do you come to the table where people are satisfied in the end?
So the question was, let's just hypothetically say the business has an insatiable appetite for technological advancement or technological change, and how do we prioritize? What organizational models do we put in place? I probably am at the smallest company represented on this panel, so maybe I have a little advantage that these guys don't, but I'll tell you what we do. We have the executive committee prioritizes key initiatives that drive towards the top line strategy. And that's typically boils down to, specific processes that we're going to target and specific metrics that we're looking to improve upon within those processes. So that kind of puts the guardrails on, because if you drive down decision making all the way down to the bottom part of the organization where people know what's going on, and then you let them steer the ship around what's the next best thing for me to do, it's going to suit their department, it's going to suit their function. They don't have that general purview of what's best for the organization as a whole. So we set broad-based objectives at the top, at steering committee level, and then we drive down to functional working groups that are oriented around a specific product. We call each of our projects a product, and those people then have decision rights to figure out how best to execute against those objectives.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead.
So since still 80% plus of sales are occurring in retail stores.
Thank you.
Since 80% or more of sales are occurring in retail stores, how important is it that people on your team are visiting the stores, seeing the way the technology is working in the stores, and also how important is it that the people that are running the retail store part of the business are in stores on a weekly basis? Because it's so easy to have this academic faraway viewpoint about everything, and that's not how the consumer is experiencing it. So.
Okay, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinarily important. You can't be on my team and not spend time in the stores for the folks that are on the stores team. At the end of the day, even other projects, so for example, we worked out a workforce management program, Kronos, and it was really run by the corporate team, but we had the retail store folks, the retail stores IT team, really are the ones that are engaging, because they understand the environment. They understand there's not a power drop in every corner. Every back room doesn't look the same. By the way, the lunchroom gets crowded and stuff throws on, and if you put a PC in there, they understand all that. It is a unique culture in a store, and you need people that are out there. And then we organize field trips. We take the rest of the IT organization out, everyone from operations to people that have nothing to do with retail stores, just so they get a sense of what it is out there. So when they're planning projects on their own, if they have something that may impact stores, they have that knowledge base now.
Thank you. John, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, we have it defined. All the companies I've been part of, either it was a corporate office initiative or it was a well-defined store visitation, or I put it in place for IT. My store systems team has to be out there every quarter, and not just with the store closest to the corporate office where you get to know everybody. They have to go out into the markets.
Michael.
We take that even a step further in that there are times when you'll have retail management or IS management. They don't see what your on-the-line folks are having to deal with. So very often you'll be rolling out new loyalty programs or specific coupon programs or offers, or just how you ring up something. And we'll sit back and watch the cashiers at work, watch the folks at work and say, gee, that transaction's taken a long time. Well, we have to do this and this and this and this. And we will often, like right now, we're going through a redraft of our menu systems within the point of sale because there's too many keystrokes to get through a process. And when you want to add your loyalty card to it, and when you want to do this and this and this, your guest, or in your case, your clients, are standing in a line waiting because the cashiers are doing this. So we require, myself included, I am in a park probably half of the time when we're in season, watching what's going on. How are our guests getting through a front gate or getting through a retail or a food environment? It is critical because very often at an executive level or at a director or manager level, you're not seeing what the frontline employees are doing. What are they doing? And at the same time, you may be giving them instructions that, hey, you need to push this product or this product. But if they can't get out from behind the register to do that, it becomes very difficult. So we have to do those things, because if we don't, again, if we're in that vacuum without communicating, you're down the road where you've added so much complexity into the systems that the frontline employees can't do what they're supposed to do, sell.
But just to be clear, Michael, when you're out sort of surveilling the store, you're not dressed as a theme park character.
I'm not just as a theme park
Thank you.
character.
Just wanted to
Or riding the roller coaster.
I am riding the roller coaster. As I look now, it's not very glamorous, but yes.
There was one more question I'd like to take before resuming. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Jared, you mentioned before you need to trust your junior staff to make mistakes, but how do you convince the execs and, how do you convince them to feel comfortable with losing money or, the costs that have been they're involved with producing any systems or software, etc.
Yeah, so this goes back to the question. It was a Vulcan mind meld?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how. No, I'm just kidding. I think I say that, but understanding that the mistakes they could possibly make are within the guardrails of having a broad set of people in the room to basically make sure that there's no egregious mistakes, right? I mean, when I say empowered folks within the organization to make some decisions, I'm saying there's somebody at a junior level from merchandising, from retail ops, from supply chain. I mean, we're not making major mistakes. It just may not be palatable for, let's say, our seasonal buyers buy completely different than our perpetual merchandise, as an example. So if I have the seasonal buyer in the room making a decision, they may actually make a mistake, quote unquote, that impacts our perpetual buyers and how they're merchandising the stores. That's not a crisis, but we need to pivot and we need to iterate on the next iteration to make sure we encounter or we account for what the other types of merchandisers would need. So it's not. It's usually not like the artery of the business. We're not playing around that with a scalpel. It's usually something much smaller.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that if you don't mind. We spend a lot of time at Amazon, and they think about this very clearly. They have this concept of one-way doors and two-way doors, right? So a one-way door is something you don't want to screw up. It's something that you don't want to impact consumer confidence or credit card processing or your SOX compliance or those kinds of things. Two-way doors, what Jared was referring to, things that you can fail, bring back out of it in a week or two, try again, see what works with the learnings that you made from the last, hold the microphone up, that you made from the last that you made from your last try. So I think it's really important to understand what kinds of things you're doing out there and break them down in some kind of categories that work for you and your organization. And the ones that you want to try to empower people are the ones that are recoverable, right? You don't want to give a junior person something that can have a SOX compliance or a PCI issue for you, obviously.
So, on the one hand, the technology capabilities of the company and the technology resources of the company don't belong to IT, they belong to the business. And we've got millennials entering our companies where they're not going to wait around for IT, they're going to digitize their work themselves. At the same time, the more they do that, the more we wind up with the dreaded shadow IT, which is more than a nuisance. It's a security issue, it's a cost issue, it's a performance issue, and it's a scale issue. So how do you balance it? How do you embrace end-user technology innovation, which is coming whether you like it or not, while keeping the enterprise secure and cost-efficient and all of the good things? John?
I actually think that challenge is getting a lot easier. Because I was in my first e-com only environment 20 years ago. I was early stage with the very first e-toys, and have seen retail and multi-channel and online only and both sides of the fence. And clearly the days of, especially when SaaS applications became available and departments could go off and kind of get something stood up real quick and hopefully IT never found out. But when you look at the omni-channel customer experience now, you can't get away with siloed e-commerce or digital systems anymore because they're all tied into your corporate enterprise loyalty and customer analytics environment so that you're driving all those personalized behaviors. You now have an enterprise order management system that is touching the website, the call center, stores, as well as all your BI. So it's actually gotten harder the last few years. We still see it with some of the little more one-off tools like the Slack and chat. All of a sudden, I was walking around the office one day and realized half the office was on Slack, and I was like, "What is that? I must be old." But I think the omni-channel customer experience is no longer allowing as much for digital silos.
Michael, do you agree? Or you?
I agree. Even when we see things like Slack, eventually someone's got to pay for it. And when it comes down to someone freeing up budget dollars in another department other than IT, that becomes an issue. So we encourage items like Slack, but at the same time, when we find those new ideas, our real goal is if it makes sense for one group, it should make sense for everyone. So we will turn around and say, that's a great idea. What does it replace from a budget perspective, from a usability perspective? And that's how we also force adoption. That if a group says, hey, this is a great tool, this is something that makes a lot of sense, we look at that and say, absolutely, we'll bring it to our committees, and if we roll it out, then something else is going to go away as a result.
So let me ask you this then, and Scott, I'll ask this of you. So we're doing a search right now for a CIO for a retail company, and what they've said is traditional developers, traditional IT resources will reside in the IT organization, but the mobile developers are reporting into marketing. Would you take that job?
You know, it's so hard to say generically, right? It's, you know, I've seen SWAT teams put together, or tiger teams, they call them, when you're self-empowered. You know, where people sit administratively, I think, is less important to me. I think what you're hearing, the theme here, is around how do you empower a team at the right levels of the organization to be able to go out and achieve a goal? You know, how do you give them single-threaded leadership? Do you pair up a business process, a business owner, you know, a business product manager, with a technical project manager and some developers to accomplish something? If some of those people administratively report to IT and some of people administratively report someplace else, it could be to a third party. I'm not so sure that matters as much. However, you know, you obviously like to try to keep like skill sets together because there's synergies, but it's not mandatory or a deal breaker, and it's really cultural, I find, in a lot of organizations.
Okay, thank you. Any other opinions on that?
I don't think it's much different than 5 or 10 years ago when the outsourcing craze was there, as to what are you going to offshore, what are you going to bring in-house? Do you have a common set of standards? So are you developing to these standards? Are you testing appropriately? Are you going through pieces? You also don't want an environment in which these different groups are competing with one another, where one group may get X amount of benefits or resources and another one doesn't. That creates adversity. So it's not a bad thing. It's no different than other cycles that you've gone through over the years. It's just making sure that whatever that one group developed, someone documented it, someone put it into a catalog, so that somebody else who has to pick it up in 2 years from now can grab it, know what was done, and when someone changes their mind, you're not sitting here saying, well, I don't know what they did.
So all the Gartner reports saying that marketing has a bigger technology budget than IT these days and are hiring their own resources doesn't bother you as long as the engagement model is clear and the governance is there?
As long as when that life cycle changes again, someone else can pick up the pieces and know what was done.
Exactly.
So,
as long as you're gone, as long as you've left the company.
Though I would add that engagement model and the process is crucial. You know, I was listening to Scott. You know, we've moved to cross-functional product teams for all of our digital platforms, and if that's not in place though, and you do have technical resources being brought other places, you're quickly going to get bit by scalability and security issues and all that. So I'd be wary if the process wasn't in place.
Okay. Any questions? No? All right. Then this brings us to our first lightning round. And I should let you know there are no prizes. Okay? When a IT investment does not realize, oh, well, here's the, sorry, rules for the lightning round are one word or phrase, no discussion from each of you, just down the line. Okay, one word or phrase, no discussion, no addressing it, that's just one answer. Okay, so you gotta think fast. When an IT investment does not realize the return that everybody hoped for, what is the culprit often?
Requirements.
Organizational change management.
Change management.
engagement.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions? So I'm going to do our final lightning round question. Actually, I'm going to do two. Ready? I'm going to go to you first, Michael, this time. For a retail company to succeed in this digital era, where customers can do what they want, they've got so many options, you've got some legacy systems, but you need new technology. If any of the members of our audience here look back in 3 years and say, man, it didn't work out, what's the critical risk factor? What will have happened, do you think, in the company? Why didn't it work out?
Maybe lack of understanding of the changing demographic of who our customers are.
Okay.
I would say lack of customer awareness as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, losing touch with the customer.
Customers, everything.
Okay, so then I'm going to bring us to one more area. we're all hiring people into our companies, into IT, into all the other business functions. And one of the things we've said, identified as an attribute we need for this digital era that we're in, this was to your point, Jared, is risk takers, the ability who are going to get right up at the table and hopefully not on a SOX compliant project, but they're going to take a risk. What are some other attributes that you're looking for in terms of that digital mindset for new people coming into the company, whether in IT or elsewhere? What are those attributes, whether they might be good at a good accountant, they might be sales, they might be marketing. But beyond that, we've talked about the fact that digital is not a technology. Digital is a capability, and that capability is driven by a mindset. What are the attributes you're looking for and that you think your business partners should be looking for in the talent that you're bringing into the organizations to drive that digital mindset in the company? John, I'll start with you.
Just
No lightning
flashing-
round.
oh,
Please,
this is not-
discuss.
Collaboration. The digital space and working cross-functionally like that absolutely requires collaboration. And I would actually expand that to say team skills, because on a team, you sometimes lead, you sometimes follow, you have to be flexible in all those roles. And those are things that, in people that have been in traditional corporate environments, they don't necessarily come easy.
Thank you. Jared?
I would say two things. If the customer is the focus, then empathy development. So people who have a quick ability to develop empathy for the person on the other side of the table, whether that's a customer, whether that's a internal stakeholder, and I'm speaking mostly from an IT perspective at this point, but it's universally applicable across the business. So can they empathize with the other individual that they're engaged with? And then the other thing would be an athlete. So when I was at Deloitte, we always said we hired athletes because we needed them to be fungible across multiple different disciplines, projects, clients, whatever it might be. The new technology paradigms are such that we're converging on a number of technology areas where people can be athletes because their technical skill sets can bounce around. They're not as siloed. So people who have that mindset, who can say, okay, you know what, yesterday I was doing PL SQL and tomorrow I'm doing Express. I know that means nothing to a lot of you, but that's the mentality. It's the person who's going to be able to wake up that morning and be just as energized to go off and do what they're doing.
Attributes?
I'm going to take my IT hat off for a second. So I have two teenagers at home, 15-year-old daughter, 19-year-old son. The biggest issue that I see with folks who come into my door, using your senses. How many people forgot in school, whatever, to talk to one another, to look you in the eye, to follow up, the most basic most basic functions. I interviewed someone last week for a six-figure salary, no follow-up email, no call, no. It's the most basic attributes. Can you look someone in the eye and speak to them one-on-one? Can you take proper notes? Can you repeat back what I just said? Can you follow up? Can you do what you said you were going to do? Are you looking, listening? I just went the reverse on that. Looking, listening. But it's those most basic skills. When I talk to my 15-year-old daughter and she's like this, and her friends are in the car and 5 of them are all like this, talking to each other, that's what I look for.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I've been waiting for like 5 minutes to say that.
Look, they're all great answers. I agree with the athlete. I agree with the basics, the basic skills and communications. I think the only thing I would add to it is somebody who can really think unconstrained. I just find that those people are some of the most interesting people to be around. You got to surround them with the right people because someone's got to make it operational. But that unconstrained thinking, looking at a problem, just seeing a different answer than anybody else does, I mean, that's gold.
Excellent. Final question. I got 20 seconds left. Oh, you go ahead. Go ahead.
In your opening remarks, you mentioned the CEO really wanting technology to drive change, right?
Yes.
I don't know if that question was answered, so I guess I'd turn it back to say, what do you do to help drive change in the organization, or how do you drive that change from a technology standpoint working for the business?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really starting like we talked about earlier, which is starting and engaging early and upfront. I'm no help to you making change if I'm brought in at the end and you already have an answer in your mind. But if I can get to that conversation earlier when you're trying to formulate a business strategy about a market you're going after, or an Asian expansion, or whatever it is that you're trying to do and drive, I can be a lot more helpful in trying to help you drive and align to that business strategy.
Okay. So all of that is to say, be kind to your CIO. Thanks so much for your time and attention. Thanks to our panelists.